Hi, my name is Matt and I run the Cornish Black Bee Company. I'm a bee farmer. I've got about 100 colonies throughout the southwest of Cornwall and I've been beekeeping about 14 years, something like that now. Typically in the UK there are 4 potential strains you might come across. There's the native bee, called the black bee. There's also the Italian bee. There's also the Carniolan and there's also the Caucasians. I've ended up being obsessed with Cornish black bees. They're our native bees. They evolved down here and they are perfectly suited to the climate. The native bee, Cornish black bee, Apis mellifera mellifera for its posh name, is known as the black bee because its abdomen, all segments are black, but you'll notice there are little lines of hairs on the abdomen as well. Its thorax has an almost ginger colour hair on as well. But the reason I like the Cornish black bee is it's meant to be here. When I started beekeeping all those years ago, the intention was to have one hive and it would sit at the bottom of the garden, and occasionally I would go down and talk to the bees and get some lovely honey at the end of the year. And gradually I learned more and more about honeybees and their importance to the environment and starting the food chain for so many other little beasties and animals and birds. And I started focusing more on ensuring that the beekeeping I was doing was, in a sense, sustainable. And I looked for methods and also types of bee that would enable that. Fundamentally, all of the efforts that I put in are not to get to a target of litres of honey or kilograms of honey or this many queens. It's fundamentally down to ensuring that I've got healthy bees. If I've got healthy bees and Mother Nature is kind, I'll get some honey. So the methods that I use have evolved over the years, and there is no perfect way of beekeeping, but there's some fundamental problems currently in the beekeeping world. One thing I try to avoid is the use of a smoker. A lot of people use a smoker all the time and they put clouds of smoke in because the books tell them, oh, it calms the bees. And it doesn't. It scares the pants off them. And the other thing I don't do is feed the bees sugar water. Standard beekeeping practice says go along in August, whenever, end of the season, and take all the honey off and then feed in gallons of sugar water. I used to be like everybody else with typically 30% losses over winter each year, and as soon as I stopped feeding it went way down, low single figures, and just proved the point to me. So there's lots of things that are done that are not in the best interest of the bee. So I'm trying to take those out of the methods I use and keep everything as naturally as I can. And the fundamental principle I have is that bees did really quite well for 130 million years before we came along and complicated everything and basically stuffed it up. Our little native honeybee has been threatened on a number of occasions. There was the Isle of Wight disease back in 1919, driven by the acarine mite, and there were huge, huge losses. It was devastating. Huge amount of Italian bees imported, and only little pockets of our native bees survived as a result. In addition, varroa mites were introduced from Asia in the mid-90s. Every single colony just about, apart from those on remote islands, is infected with varroa mite, and our bees have no defence against it. We constantly have to help the bees to actually manage those infestation levels. All the problems are man-made. So farming practices. Our use of the land has changed a lot. So since the Second World War, we've only got 3% of the wildflower meadows left. So the diversity of forage is greatly reduced. That's been a big pressure and threat on a lot of the colonies, and we see it even worse in the States. We just keep putting pressure on them, and they can't evolve quick enough. I'm often asked why a honeybee is so important, given that we've got other pollinators as well. And the point about honeybees and their importance is they could store honey over winter. And that then meant that the colony itself could get through winter and probably emerges from early spring with about 8,000 to 10,000 individuals who are immediately available for pollination. If we lost the honeybees, the landscape would be extremely different and extremely dull. People talk about the value of pollination in terms of agriculture, and that's huge. But more importantly, it's the commencing of the food chain for so many little mammals and birds and things like that. That's the importance of the honeybee. We seem to have held our own for the last 10 years. I think colony numbers have increased very slightly, but it's requiring quite a lot of effort and input from beekeepers, bee farmers to enable that. And we need something more sustainable. So we need to kind of give the bees a break. The ideal is that we get back to a situation where bees can survive on their own and they're not dependent on beekeepers and bee farmers. And that has to be the only way forward for the bees to be sustainable. So we keep trying, and I will remain hopeful.